Good morning, Instagram. Good morning, YouTube. Good morning, podcast listeners. My name is Dustin Jones, and you are listening to the PT on Ice Daily Show brought to you by the Institute of Clinical Excellence. It is Wednesday. That means it's Hump Day. That means many of you all got an amazing email, the Hump Day Hustle. That means it is also the day that we talk about all things older adults. Today's topic at hand: goodbye osteoporosis, plus a new free resource brought to you by the MMOA Squad, Modern Management of the Older Adult. Before we get into the goods and talking about saying goodbye to osteoporosis, a couple announcements. MMOA Essential Foundations, our online course, is starting August 17th. It is currently about 50% full. At this stage of the game, it's likely going to sell out. So if you're wanting to get into that online cohort, I would get on that sooner than later. Also, in terms of live courses, we have several coming up, some that are public and available to you all, August 13th through 14th. We're going to be in Maryland, and then August 27th, 28th, we're going to be in Greenville, South Kakalaki, South Carolina. Awesome. All right, let's talk about it. Goodbye osteoporosis, plus a new free resource. Julie Brower, good morning. This is a big term, osteoporosis, right? This is a conversation that I am having more and more and more with the folks that I'm serving at Stronger Life in Lexington, Kentucky. And a lot of folks are very concerned about the topic of osteoporosis. They're also they're kind of left out in left field with this diagnosis, and it's kind of common in the medical system, right? We are serving our folks. They go to their physician, or they get some type of screening, some type of diagnosis, if you will, that is multi-syllable. They end up asking Dr. Google what this actually means, and they're left with some very scary information. Think about congestive heart failure, right? That term that for us, when I see CHF, I know there's a lot of life to be lived, right? There's a lot of things that we can do about that diagnosis. And then there's so many stages of CHF that I know just that diagnosis does not necessarily equate to a death sentence. But yet when someone gets that diagnosis, it literally scares them to death. They don't know what to do with that. Osteoporosis is kind of in that same realm. Oh my gosh, my bones are brittle. They could break if I bend over and tie my shoes. Oh my gosh, I need to stay safe. I need to be calm. I don't need to freak out here. Oh my gosh, this is going to be absolutely terrible. It's only downhill from here, right? That can happen because what happens with a lot of these individuals, they may reach a certain age, let's say 65 if you're a female, 70 if you're a male is typically when a lot of that screening is starting. They probably have some type of questionnaire that could lead to a DEXA scan, and they get a number, aka a T-score, and they're slapped with that diagnosis, and they're probably given some type of biphosphonate. Fosamax is a very popular one, and saying, hey, you need to go exercise, take these pills. Also think about calcium and vitamin D supplementation, and then off you go. I'll talk to you in a year, right? What do you do with that? They go home, they search it, and they're just left, oh my gosh, I've got these brittle bones that could combust any second. What do I do? This is a very common situation that leaves a lot of room for fear, that leaves a lot of room for doubt, lack of confidence, and you have the ability to really redirect folks and really change the trajectory of how this diagnosis can influence these individuals or not. So let's talk about this. I want to make sure that we're all clear and we're all speaking the same language here. So when you hear osteoporosis, you need to understand how they get to that diagnosis. Okay. So when folks are typically it's 65 for women, 70 for men, they start that screening process to check for their bone mineral density. Usually it's a questionnaire. There's several questionnaires that folks will use that will indicate, okay, this person needs further diagnostic evaluation. Typically that is going to be a DEXA scan. That DEXA scan is looking at bone mineral density. And what they are doing is they are comparing someone's bone mineral density to the norms of the same sex, but a younger age. So these are younger individuals that they're comparing their bone mineral density to. And so they have these T-scores, real fancy statistical term, but basically based on those norms, they're comparing norms to the younger same-sex individuals. And based on kind of the standard deviations away from those norms, that will determine their diagnosis. So let's say if you have a T-score of 0 to -1, that's still considered to be normal. If you're in that -1 to that -2.5 range, that's considered osteopenia, or you're to be osteopenic. And then if you're below that -2.5, you have osteoporosis. Dum dum dum. Right now, then they probably get some type of medication prescribed, usually a biphosphonate, typically calcium and vitamin D supplementation, and then told to quote unquote exercise. We know what that means, right? Sit and get fit, right? So that's typically the path that they are going along. They go to Dr. Google and then they end up on your course of care, and you have a huge opportunity here, a huge opportunity to really redirect that course. So let's talk about three things that we all need to focus on when we're working with folks where bone mineral density and osteoporosis, where that conversation is on our radar and something that we want to discuss. The first thing, number one, the first thing you need to do is get their DEXA scan. Please get their DEXA scan, because osteoporosis is really an umbrella term, because you can get that diagnosis. And when you actually look at someone's DEXA scan, it can be rather interesting, because what they will typically do is they look at the bone mineral density on the right and the left side of their wrists, maybe the head of their humerus or the neck of their humerus, usually both hips, and then they'll look at the lumbar spine. So it's in these very critical parts of the body, and they're comparing left to right if there is a left and right. And what you will often see is that someone may be osteoporotic on one side and then osteopenic on the other. Or they may be osteopenic in one particular part of their body and they're good to go elsewhere. So whenever you see that term osteoporosis, you need to dive into that, because that is going to influence a lot of loading strategies and exercises that you may give preference to. I've seen this way too much, especially now at Stronger Life, where I've had the luxury of working with folks over 2 to 3 years, and I'm able to see their DEXA scans. And they usually bring and say, hey, what do you think of this? And it's pretty crazy of how someone can have osteoporosis in their wrist, but both of their hips are completely normal. Their lumbar vertebrae are completely normal as well. So what do you think I'm probably going to give preference to with loading those individuals to move them away from osteoporosis? We're going to do a lot of upper extremity, resistance training, power-based training, plyometrics, weight bearing, that type of stuff. So you want to get their DEXA scan, because that is going to inform your preference for different exercises and how you may load them up to encourage them to improve that bone mineral density. So get their DEXA scan. That's number one. Number two, it is imperative that we portray to these folks that this diagnosis is not a death sentence. I repeat, osteoporosis is not a death sentence. It is not set in stone. Your bones are living, breathing tissues, and we can do something about it. We can progress from osteoporosis to osteopenia. That is very easy to do for a lot of individuals. We may, not as common, but we may be able to shift people from osteopenia to quote unquote normal. That there's a lot of things that we can do to manipulate our bone mineral density so we don't have to live with this diagnosis and with this elevated risk of fracture for the rest of our lives. I can't tell you how many folks that I interact with that get that diagnosis and they think, oh my gosh, I have this forever and ever and ever, and I'm just going to keep popping this pill and exercising, aka stretching that green rubber band, and hopefully I won't have a fall and ultimately have a fracture. We can do something about it. All right, so number one, get their DEXA scan, analyze that information. Number two, this is a big one, make sure that they understand osteoporosis is not a death sentence. And then number three, here's where you come in with your skill set and your ability to really change people's lives, and that's load it up. We have to load these bones. Now, I want to talk about three specific modes of exercise that we want you all to consider to really shift people away from osteoporosis to osteopenia or normal. So one, we all talk about this every day of the PT on Ice Daily Show, maybe except for Thursdays, right? But we talk about progressive resistance training. The evidence is very clear that if we can progressively apply load through resistance training over long periods of time, that we can really change people's bone mineral density in a significant manner, right? Think back to the Lifmore trial. For anyone that's taken modern management of the older adult, you've read this article, and a lot of the articles that have subsequently been published, that they were able to load people up with some of the same parameters and dosage that we would typically preach for getting people stronger. Well, If you load them up with progressive resistance training, their muscles will get stronger and also their bones as well. The key, though, is how we apply that and how we progress it. If someone does have osteoporosis, it typically you are going to be a little bit more conservative with their progression. You may not jump all the way up to their 1RM or training at a super high intensity early on in your course of care. You're going to test the waters, see what you can handle, see how they respond, but it's progressive and it's going to be over a longer period of time. So that is difficult, right? For some of you that may be only seeing people for a day, well, you can still set people up that's going to be seeing them down the road. All right, Betty, I'm here in the hospital working with you. Right after you've had this fracture, we're going to get you moving, make sure you're safe, make sure you can handle those stairs and that curb at home. Then you're probably going to go home and you're probably going to have home health physical therapy. And Julie Brower is going to be seeing you in the home, and she is going to do an amazing job and make sure you get as strong as possible so you don't have to worry about breaking that hip ever again. Right? Pass that baton, Julie Brower says on Instagram. That's what we really want to think about with this progressive resistance training. Progressive is huge. All right. We already know all that stuff. We talk about that all the time. So that's number one. Number two, high velocity power training. These quick movements where they have to generate speed to produce force relatively quickly. Good for many reasons, right? Not just loading bones, but that gives a very unique stress to bones that will increase bone mineral density. So there's some really interesting research looking at power training where we're really focusing on speed, and that really creates a pretty amazing ground reaction force that is going to stimulate the growth of bone mineral density. With power training, high velocity power training, can often drift to just focusing on the lower extremities. Don't forget the arms. Don't forget the upper extremities here. This is huge because we need to be loading up their arms in case of they have a fall. They put that outstretched hand on the ground or whatever surface. We want to make sure those arms are able to handle that impact. High velocity power training. So think of some of the common exercises that you're doing, but do it fast. Do it fast. High velocity power training. Number three, and this is the big dog that I don't think we're critical enough on, that we really need to think about, and that's weight bearing impact training of the arms and legs. When they're bearing their weight and we're focusing on getting impact, when we want impact, when we're jumping and encouraging folks to have a loud landing, where we're wanting them to feel that jarring sensation as they land. That impact training can go a long way to really stimulating and increase bone mineral density. I want to share a graph with you all for the podcast listeners and the folks on the video. I'm going to read some of these numbers out. We all probably learned this at some point throughout our physical therapy training, and definitely if you've taken something like the CSCS, you've learned this, but we need to remember these numbers because they really are going to influence what exercises we pick or we don't pick in terms of how much ground reaction force our body is experiencing that could ultimately increase bone mineral density. So what I'm going to read off is the exercise and then how many times body weight that person is experiencing through ground reaction forces. And this is pretty surprising, very surprising actually. So lunging, you experience 1.1 times your body weight. Walking, 1.2 times your body weight. Think about that, right? When these folks are given that diagnosis that, hey, go exercise, and oftentimes they are quote unquote exercising, and then they're on a walking program and they're perceiving, oh, this walking is great for so many things. Also my bone mineral density. Well, it's only 1.2 times your body weight. Is that enough to really stimulate an increase in bone mineral density? I don't know. It's not working for a lot of the folks that I know. Walking, marching in place, 1.5 times your body weight. Running is 2.6. A 12-inch step up, unloaded, 2.7 times your body weight. A jumping takeoff, 3.5 times your body weight. A heel drop, coming up onto your toes, dropping those heels so you have that loud landing. You feel that jarring sensation. Anybody can do this regardless of your setting. That is 3.6 times your body weight. A jump squat is 3.8. A foot stomp is 4.6 times your body weight. A vertical jump is 4.7. And then a vertical squat jump is 7.1 times your body weight. Think about those numbers. Think about the exercises you're prescribing. Are you leveraging those ground reaction forces to increase bone mineral density? Are you using that weight-bearing impact training 2, stimulate some bone mineral density. Now, these were all lower extremity exercises. Think about what a plank would do. Think about what crawling would do. Think about shoulder taps, plyometric push-ups. Think about all the things that we can do to stimulate bone mineral density through our legs, through our arms, through our spine as well. Crazy numbers, crazy numbers. So number one, get their DEXA, give them context, really dig into that diagnosis. What does it mean that's going to influence your loading strategy? Number two, once you understand their situation, let them know it's not a death sentence. There's something we can do about this. Number three, load it up. Load it up, gave you some ideas there. Now, what's really important is that we do this with our patients, but I think what's even more important is that we give this information to our communities, to the folks that we're working with, maybe the gym that we go to, or a local group of older adults that may be at a higher risk of osteoporosis or some type of fracture. They need to know this information. What we've created, the MMA Squad, has created a free presentation community workshop that you can take and execute on your own. So what we've done is created unbranded slides so you can put your own branding on that slide deck, take it out to the community, and share the good news. We've also done a recording of an example workshop that we've done so you know exactly how to speak to those slides. We feel like this is a very important topic, and we want to equip everyone that follows the PT on Ice Daily Show, that follows ICE, to be able to speak to this information well and share this with the masses in their community. So we would love for you to check this workshop out. The way to access that is if you go to ptonice.com and then you click on the free resources tab, you'll see Run Your Own Osteoporosis Workshop. This could change someone's life. This is a big topic. I don't think we're talking about it enough, and we can definitely change people's lives with a little bit of information and a little bit of our skill set. We can really move the needle here. All right. Let me know if you have any thoughts, questions, concerns. Y'all have a lovely rest of your Wednesday. I'm off to the CrossFit Games with several other ICE faculty. I've got no clue what to expect. I'm pretty excited about this. So yeah, be sure to check out the CrossFit Games. They're actually starting today for the individuals, teams, all that fun stuff. Going to be interesting. All right. See y'all.